Pent up to welcome these folks here tonight. So first of all, could you join me in welcoming Kirsten Kennedy? Please also join me in welcoming Michelle Lee. Join me in welcoming Jason Metzen. Let's give a welcome to Joe Radinovich. And finally, a welcome to Soren Sorensen. Now, the way we're going to do this in terms of order is when we start with a candidate, we'll move from right to left. And so we will start with different candidates and different questions, but just so the candidates know, that's how it will go. We did use some random number generators to try to make this fair, make sure that everybody gets a chance to start. And the opening statements will start with Michelle Lee.
Bonjour. Hello. Ni hao. When I announced my campaign, I made some promises. First, I would listen and be a voice for people throughout the district, regardless of their politics. Second, I would refuse to take any money from corporate political action committees. Third, I would not engage in the politics of destruction. I have kept those promises throughout this campaign. As for the issues, I have a laundry list, and I just want to read down them because I'm under a 2-minute time limit. I support single-payer health care, Medicare for all. Women's rights are human rights, and passage of the Equal Rights Amendment is long overdue. I believe we should provide free tuition for public colleges and universities. I am a strong advocate for trade and vocational education. Broadband internet services need to be expanded throughout the rural areas in this great district. I oppose any cuts in social services, including Social Security, Medicare, and supplemental food assistance. I support our veterans. Families dealing with mental illness and addiction need our help. I support family farms and farm-to-table programs. I support efforts to diversify the economy on the Iron Range. I oppose copper-nickel mining near the Boundary Waters Canoe area and within the Lake Superior watershed we all live downstream. I support unions and collective bargaining and believe right to work is wrong for Minnesota. I travel throughout this district and listen to hundreds of folks, friends and neighbors. Here's what I've learned. We do have some problems, but America is not broken. People are willing to roll up their sleeves, join forces, and work hard to solve our problems. We can move forward together to build a better future for our families, our communities, and yes, this country. It starts with each and every one of us in this room, working together on issues we all agree upon. I've spent a lifetime of listening. I want to take what I've heard to Washington. I want to make positive change for every person, whether you live rurally or in a big city within this district. I want to take those concerns to Washington and create good legislation, good common sense legislation that's going to benefit everyone, whether you're a millionaire, whether you're a member of the working poor or the middle class. Thank you, and I'm stopping.
Soren Sorensen.
Hello, my name is Soren Sorensen, and my campaign is about human rights. My campaign is about the freedom of expression, securing the freedom of movement. Healthcare is a human right. Nutritious food and clean water are human rights. We need to lift up women and girls and secure the rights and prevent discrimination against folks from LGBTQIA backgrounds. We need to respect the treaty rights of the First Nations. So those are some pretty basic human rights. I grew up near Bemidji, Minnesota. I grew up around agriculture, animal husbandry. We raised goats for meat and milk and bees. We grew vegetables, grew a lot of our own food. We tapped maple trees and we made maple syrup. We ate fish from the lake. You know, more and more, that's not something that our kids are going to be able to do, our grandchildren are going to be able to do. And we need to keep our lakes clean and cool so that future generations can enjoy some of these same experiences. My parents were social entrepreneurs. My mom was a founder of the Northwoods Coalition for Battered Women. She sheltered battered women in our household growing up. My dad started group homes for the developmentally disabled. I understood that that's what people who are secure do, is they help secure the freedoms of others, right? I studied biology and computer science, but activism called me after the invasion of Iraq. Tim talked about turbulent times. I had the experience of working through some very turbulent times in Indonesia, where I was studying biology. I lived and worked through the Asian economic crisis and helped folks recover after the Boxing Day tsunami. My experience in Asia will help us rebuild trade and create market opportunities for our farmers, for our small businesses, and for our manufacturers. So I'm ready to help us rebuild our country after we get through our current turbulent times, and we probably need to impeach Trump, right?
My name is Joe Radinovich. I'm from Crosby, Arlington, Minnesota, and before I get going, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We've all traveled the district and been in many of these forums, and this is probably one of the best crowds I've seen. So kudos to you. I know that there are a lot of people in here that are fired up to take back the State House and to take back the U.S. Congress and to make sure that we hold the people accountable to the people of this great state and to this great country. And so I commend you for that. As I mentioned, I'm from Crosby, Arlington, Minnesota. I grew up in a very working class family. My great-grandfather was a miner, my grandfather was a miner, my uncle was a miner. My dad was an electrician, so my brother became an electrician, my other brother became an electrician. And everybody here has heard this joke before, so we'll just skip that for now. But I went into a different line of work. I became a union organizer at a young age, and I was working with federal employees across this country. I recognize the value of work, and I recognize the value of working people. But one of the most important things I think we're facing as a nation is that work is changing. And this is the big idea in this campaign. In 1980, there were 14,500 people working in the iron mines in northern Minnesota. They produced 40 million tons of iron ore. Today, there are 4,000 people, and they still produce the same 40 million tons of iron ore. But that's not limited to mining. It's happening on farms, it's happening in factories, it's happening on the highways, it's happening at the grocery store, where a generation ago, somebody would scan our groceries and bag them and maybe walk them out. Now there's one person standing in a self-checkout bay doing the work that 6 or 8 people used to do. But they're not seeing the increase in wages and benefits. And that's the big story of our country. We are wealthier and more productive than we have ever been before, and yet working people are losing ground. We need a government that's responsive to the people of this country, that fights for working people every single day, that's advocating for improvements in child care and health care, that's protecting seniors in retirement, Social Security, Medicare, pensions, and that's fighting for a different way to do politics in this country. We need to remove the corrupting influence of secret money from our political system and take back our government. That's what's at stake in this election. That's why I'm here tonight. I'd be honored to earn your vote, and I'm looking forward to talking with everybody else throughout the course of this forum. Thanks.
Well, thank you again all for joining us on a nice, cool, rainy night, which I'm sure is welcome for all of you to not have a little bit of warm weather that's keeping you out and sweating. And thank you for joining us here and listening to us and why we want to get out to Congress to represent you. I'm Jason Metza. I'm an Iron Ranger, a 3-term legislator, a husband and a dad. And I believe in fairness. It's why I got into politics in the first place. I grew up watching people working way too hard just to get by. And when I went to the legislature, it's why I didn't spend a lot of time on the House floor giving speeches. I focused on making sure that our workers got the pensions that they deserve, on fighting for unemployment benefits for our steel workers, on building things, like our Highway 53 bridge up in northeastern part of the district, with American-made steel. I'm solutions-oriented. I like to roll up my sleeves and get things done. And here's what I'm proposing we get done in Washington. It's a Northern New Deal, where we have Medicare for everyone, where we make sure that students can go to 2- and 4-year universities without graduating with a huge amount of debt that's going to saddle them for the next 10 to 20 years. And that we revitalize our economy in this district by investing in the 21st century jobs that our kids are going to need to have available to them so that they can stay here and raise their families and thrive. want a Northern New Deal, help me get to Washington so I can work on those things for our region. Again, I'm Jason Metza. Thank you again for being here tonight, and I hope to earn your support.
Good evening. I'm so excited to be in my hood. The Hagen Farm is about 2 miles away from here. Canute, my father, and Kathy, my mother, are sitting in the front row, and it's really nice to get to look at people I love when we're doing this. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am as a person, who I am as a leader, and where I believe we can take our country. I'm a single mom of 5 great kids. My oldest is 27, my youngest is 15. I started college at 45 and graduated at 52. I know what it's like to work 2 jobs and have a hard time making ends meet. That's why I'm always grateful that I have a family that farms. When we needed a few extra things, it showed up at my house. I am so proud to be here tonight as the daughter of an immigrant, Norwegian-born, American-raised, but most importantly, I am so proud of democracy in action, and that's what's happening here tonight. Because like some, I believe it's time we're gonna have to save our democracy. We have $1 trillion going on our debt over the next year for tax cuts for the 1%. This is what I see. Single moms trying to go to school, single dads trying to support their family, working 2 and 3 jobs, farmers that are closing up shop, farmers that are committing suicide, LGBTQ kids having a difficult time moving forward. I have seniors that have to decide on medication or putting food on their table at night. In our district, while we have from Wyoming, Minnesota, all the way to International Falls, we need to make some choices. And my dad would say, we're gonna make the basic smart choices. We're gonna invest in infrastructure, bridges, roads, airports, rail, and agriculture. We need to invest in our farms and help our farmers and protect our seniors and children. I'm asking you to join me. Kirsten Kennedy, thank you.
For our first question, we'll start with Joe Radinovich. Although the implementation of core pieces of the Affordable Care Act was followed by a dramatic decrease in the number of people without health insurance, there have been continuing challenges in making access to health care affordable and available to everybody. And the Affordable Care Act has also been the subject of continuing challenges in courts, in Congress, and elsewhere. What specific steps would you support to improve our country's healthcare system to enable more people to access affordable medical care?
Yes, that's a really important question. I'm going to start with the big ideas first. I'm a supporter of a Medicare for all single-payer approach. I think that's the vision for our country, and the reason I think that's the vision for our country that we need to pursue is because we know that the problem with healthcare at this point in time is that as Americans, we pay more than any per person than any other nation on the face of the earth. The second most is Switzerland, which is 31% less than America. We spend 18% of our GDP on healthcare costs in this country, and we know that Medicare operates at about a 5% overhead rate. Private insurance programs operate between 13 and 18%. And so in my opinion, the question we have for those insurance companies is, what value are you providing for that amount of money? Too many of our healthcare dollars are being dedicated to things that are not healthcare related. They're going to CEO salaries, they're going to advertising, they're going to lobbyists, and there's no more maddening example of this than what happened at the state capitol this year. We know we have an opioid crisis in this country, and we know that pharmaceutical companies have profited from that opioid crisis, and they've even bent the rules so they could sell more pills. There was a solution proposed by a Republican, it was supported by Democrats and had wide public approval. It was called the penny a pill legislation to tax those pharmaceutical companies 1 penny per pill. So what happened? Pharma deployed 36 lobbyists to the state capitol. That's more lobbyists than there are senators in the majority party. We wish we had one more with Tim Nelson here. But that's more senators than there are, more lobbyists than there were senators in the majority party. They killed that legislation. And as if it weren't bad enough that they took your seat at the table, that special interest replaced the interest of the people, the worst part about it was that when you went to go pick up the medicine that you needed to stay healthy, or that your loved one needed to stay alive, you paid for those lobbyists. That's where your money is going. And we need to make sure that whatever system we have, we hold the people who are profiting from our healthcare system accountable to the people of this country. We need to remove the middlemen and make more efficient delivery of this system. There's a number of things we can do, including using leverage to buy drugs at a cheaper price. We can provide a public option. We can do all sorts of those policy things if we muster the political will.
Jason Benson.
Well, healthcare is a human right, and I believe we need to really work on passing a Medicare for all system. And the stories that I've heard across this district, I'll give you an example. We spent a few days on a community conversations tour in June, about half of the month, going out and listening to people. A woman I met in Walker got a letter saying that her insurance coverage for medication was denying it. No explanation, no option for appeal. That's wrong. We heard a story over in Baxter, another young woman who said that people were rationing their insulin medication because they couldn't afford their medication to stay healthy and productive because of the rising cost of drug prices. That's wrong too. We need to change that. We can change that. We need to start prioritizing people over profits. And I'm proposing a Medicare for all system that's a little expanded, that would provide us to not only continue to serve folks that we are in Medicare, but get to a few more. And when I say Medicare for all, it means for your physical health, your mental health, your dental, your vision, and for you women out there especially, your reproductive health. Those are the priorities in Medicare for all that I want to fight for when I get to Washington for you.
Great answers. I am someone also who has struggled with healthcare. Just co-pays alone are probably my second highest bill other than my mortgage with 5 kids. They're very expensive. We had a Democratic president, House and Senate, that did not pass single-payer legislation. What I'm offering is that we take the best parts of the ACA, we strengthen them and expand them, we lower the age of Medicare, and then we expand it. We expand Medicare for everyone as a public option, and we start taking the steps to get us to single-payer. Medicare is our single-payer model that we have in the United States, and we can use it. We can use it to leverage the prices for services and care, for prescription drugs, and as said before, become a country where we treat the whole person. It's not just about physicals. It's about having therapies people need. It's about being able to get medication and not having to worry to pay back for it. But we're gonna have to get people to cross the aisle. The political will needs to come, and I believe if we build it and we work across the aisles together, we can move forward.
Michelle Lee.
I'm an old broadcaster. I could probably shout my answer, but I'll use the microphone instead. The number one reason for bankruptcy in this country is a medical crisis. In fact, a recent survey indicated that people are more frightened to go to their mailboxes today to get a medical bill than to actually be diagnosed with a medical illness. There's something terribly wrong in this country. And we all go out, we talk to people, but we listen. More importantly, we all listen to folks. I was down in Pine County not too long ago, and a senior citizen came up to me and said, Michelle, I gotta tell you a story. My wife and I had to mortgage our home so I could afford to get dental treatment. And then I went up to Walmart not too long ago up in Cloquet, and I was checking out. Yeah, I shop at Walmart. I live in a small town, not too many options. But the woman came up to me and she said, I just want to tell you that I'm a registered nurse, and last month I started experiencing chest pain. And I made a decision Should I wait that pain out over the weekend, or should I go to the emergency room? She knew that she was gonna be facing a $6,000 out-of-pocket expense if she went to the emergency room, whether she was having a heart attack or not. She waited it out. She went home, she took an aspirin, and then she ended up going to urgent care several days later to save on that out-of-pocket expenses. We have to get a handle on this. As I said earlier, I'm very supportive of single-payer Medicare for all, and if elected, my first action will be to sign on to Representative Keith Ellison's expanded and improved Medicare for All Act, which guarantees universal health care. It's gonna have to be a closed system. It's gonna be all in. We're all gonna have to be in to make this work. It's not gonna happen overnight. It is a plan that we're going to have to look at and work towards and develop. But that's the #1 crisis our country is facing now, here in the trenches, in the rural areas, and in our big cities.
I've been an activist for Medicare for All, or HR 676, for 9 or 10 years now. As the state director for Progressive Democrats of America here in Minnesota, I followed, blow by blow as ACA was crafted, and we were let down by the Obama administration and politicians like R.T. Ryback as they first championed a public option and then let that drop. Some of the problems with ACA include that individual mandate and tax penalties for those that can't get a policy that works. There are not enough well-run exchanges. It's resulted in businesses hiring fewer people for less than full-time jobs so that they can stay under those thresholds where they don't have to operate under the ACA. So the failure to create a public option and the individual mandate and some of the restrictions that end up being passed on to employees with fewer hours are some of the biggest problems with ACA. Also, our companies have a opportunity cost when they are searching for benefits packages and insurance for their employees. That's something that companies in the UK and Germany don't have to contend with. So HR 676, or an expanded and improved Medicare for All, is the best solution for our country. It has a lot of advantages. It is a human rights issue, and that's where I'm going to replace the ACA with Medicare for All. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with Kirsten Kennedy. Although our nation's unemployment rate remains at just 4%, income inequality has steadily risen over the last 30 years, and further automation has the potential to further dramatically impact several high employment professions. What do you believe are the most promising ways to support economic opportunity here in the 8th Congressional District?
Thank you. And just to clarify, our district is hurting. 10 of the poorest counties in Minnesota are located in our district. The median starting wage in our district is $12.15. We must revitalize our district and take a holistic look at what that's going to be. Because as we know, North Branch and Wyoming, Minnesota are not the same as farther north or International Falls. Everywhere has an individual look. And this is what I would say. We need to be serious about economic development. We need to go after what we want to be. I always say a budget reflects values. The budget right now in the United States government does not reflect my values. I would say let's incentivize and give breaks for small farms and small businesses. Let's invest at the federal level in our infrastructures. Our cities, our counties cannot handle the costs. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We need to invest in rail. We need to make a commitment to have some people movers from Duluth down south so that not everyone has to drive a car. If we say we're serious about getting off of fossil fuels, then we have to make different choices. We need to invest in high-speed internet, not just in the city centers, but out, so people can stay connected. And finally, we need to make sure that moving forward, we take care of people's needs. Every city is different. We're aging. A lot of businesses need workers. No one should have to work 3 jobs to support their family. We need to have a conversation about it, and I believe we can do it. If we went in $1 trillion to give 1% tax breaks, we have the finances available to make it right in our district.
Michelle Lee.
Could you repeat the question?
Certainly. Although our nation's unemployment rate remains at just 4%, income inequality has steadily risen over the last 30 years, and further automation has the potential to dramatically impact several high employment professions. What do you believe are the most promising ways to support economic opportunity here in the 8th Congressional District?
Well, first off, I believe education is the great leveler. It lifts all boats, truly. And when I travel around this district, it's not a question of a shortage of jobs. It is a question, we have a shortage of trained workers. You could go to a lot of the trade schools, a lot of the VOTECs, and they're producing young people to fill jobs. But in the meantime, you go out there and you see now hiring workers wanted. I was up in International Falls. Good Republican woman told me, she owns a trucking company, and she said, Michelle, I can't find truck drivers. And I said, what do you mean you can't? We can't find them? There's not enough people that are trained to drive my trucks, and I'm willing to pay them $60,000 a year plus benefits, weekends home with the family. So you have to start flipping the switch. And I was guilty of this as a parent when my son, he's 32 years old now, he was graduating from high school, and I pushed him into a 4-year degree. You gotta get a 4-year degree to be a success in this country. The darn thing is, in 2008, the bottom dropped out, and all of those kids coming out of college ended up with minimum wage jobs. They ended up living in their parents' basements. 10 years later, they still haven't caught up with the economy. I'm saying we have to flip the switch of what we're telling our young people today, rather than going off to those 4-year degrees and that chain of expense and student debt through the rest of your life, carrying those chains. Look at the trade schools, look at the VOTECs. When VOTECs can educate a student, they can come out and make $35 as a welder, $35 an hour as a welder, or get a job at $60,000 to $80,000 driving a truck. I think that is a noble profession, as well as electricians. You can just go down the line. When I look at my town, my small town, the families who have done well and weathered it, they have moms or dads who are electricians, plumbers. Try to find a plumber in Moose Lake when you need one. And all the plumbers, electricians, a lot of them are getting older, they're starting to retire, and we're gonna have to start filling those jobs, and it starts with supporting our trades.
So Kirsten said that our budget is a reflection of our values, and I think that's true, but we also need to look at the return on investment, and I think there are some really neat places where our values, where we're trying to do the right thing, matches really well with what kind of ignites the economy, right? When Obama and Biden were working on the stimulus package, one of the things that they increased dramatically was food stamps. They increased food stamps, or SNAP, 10% across the board, because poor people have to spend the money that they have, right? Food stamps helps farmers, it helps grocers in small towns, and it builds the bodies and brains in tomorrow's workforce. So we need to increase SNAP. We need to consider universal basic income in order to keep money flowing through Northwood's economies. Social Security benefits often are the only source of money in a lot of our small towns. Obama did a couple of other really neat things, right? So he made it possible for equity crowdfunding. Before 2012, in order to have a chance of starting a real business that might go public, you needed to have a network of people you already knew. You had to have previous relationships with qualified investors. You needed to be surrounded by millionaires and billionaires in order to build a business that would go public. Now we've got equity crowdfunding. We need to support entrepreneurs. We need to create regional markets for wealth, for creating wealth through, get off Wall Street. I mean, Wall Street is so toxic. We need to raise capital locally to meet our own demands and support local small businesses that can begin to solve our problems and stop relying on the big infrastructure projects and these toxic companies like Glencore and Enbridge for jobs. So that's the start, right?
I think that technology and mechanization displacing working people across industries is probably the biggest challenge that we're going to face in our lifetime. Rapidly accelerating technology improves our productivity and improves oftentimes the quality of life for people across this country, but it also has a dramatic impact on small town economies and economies across our country. Just in the last few weeks, I read an article about the largest iron mine in the world. It'll be entirely driverless trucks in the next 2 years. I read another article about farm country that says that there's a prototype robot right now that'll run over the roads and use individual cameras and applications to weed each plant along the way. Think about how we've seen growth in tractors, from 8-row combines to 32-row combines that are GPS guided. All of this stuff comes at a cost when it comes to people's ability to provide for themselves and their family. And I think that we need to do a few things. I think we need to make the smart investments, and that's in the people and infrastructure of this country. When I say people, I'm talking about education in the form of childcare. We know that for every dollar we spend, we see a $9 to $16 return on the investment over the life of that child. We know for every child who has access to a high-quality program by the time they're 3, that we see a lot less divergence in achievement over the course of their life. We know that single payer could free up people to move around the economy, not to worry about leaving a job that provides them health care. We see that investments in broadband and roads and bridges and high-speed internet can improve commercial activity across states like Minnesota. But I also want to say one thing, that we need to make sure that the jobs we have pay a good wage. One of my best friends was a starting teacher in Crosby, Arrington, Minnesota. His wife worked, I think, at a veterinarian clinic as an assistant there. They had to rely on WIC. He was a starting teacher in Crosby, Arrington, and a 4-year education or a 5-year education, he had to rely on WIC. We've got people working in retail, we've got people working in the care continuum who could walk out and make more money at a fast food restaurant right now. We need to make sure that we have a minimum wage that supports people in this country, that we're targeting our public programs to supporting people in their development, and we need to muster the political will to pay for it, and we have the ability and resources in this country to do so.
One of the things that I outlined in our Northern New Deal was making sure that we're prioritizing 21st century jobs. We need to protect the jobs in this district in order to move forward, but that's not nearly enough. We need to make sure that we're investing in our communities and that they have the resources to be able to thrive on their own as well and attract that local business that might be teetering on coming in, that someone has a local relationship with. And I think we can also become a district that makes sure that we're looking forward to our kids. And we can be building the renewable energy resources right here in the 8th Congressional District and shipping them out all over the world. For me, that's an important thing. I've got a young son at home who would love to have a job in whatever field he can choose, and I would love it to be something creative and something that inspires him. And there's one thing I think about when I think of my son in the future, and that's if you can work, you should be able to find employment somewhere. That's why one of the second proposals I put out in our Northern New Deal was a federal jobs guarantee. And these aren't really new ideas. We had a family store that was across the road. My great-great-grandpa had it from a CC camp. And the investment that those workers made when they got their paychecks, my grandpa would go up there as a little kid. Those workers were so proud to be able to send money home to their families with wherever they were coming from to build things up here in northern Minnesota. And a lot of pride came with that. I want to make sure that we take the people who are off the rolls, not accounted for, opportunity and will to get out there and work, our government should be putting them to work, building the infrastructure that we really need in partnership with our trades and construction, and make sure that our communities have those resources so that you all can get by in your day-to-day.
For the next question, we'll begin with Soren Sorensen. Although these estimates vary based on policy changes and changes in our economy, reports in June suggested that Medicare's Hospital Insurance Trust Fund would be depleted by 2026, which is 3 years sooner than the estimate given by the administration just a year ago. And a companion report suggested that the Social Security trust funds for old age benefits and disability insurance may be depleted by 2034. What specific steps would you take in Congress, support in Congress, to seek to ensure that those supports continue to remain available over time?
The most straightforward way to pay for keeping Social Security and Medicare solvent into the future is a tax that's being championed by the National Nurses Union, and it's championed by Bernie Sanders. It's time that Wall Street begin to pay its fair share. It's called the Robin Hood tax, and it's a 0.5% tax on some Wall Street transactions. And that goes a great distance towards paying for these programs into the future and paying down our debt. So I think that is the most obvious target, and I think we outnumber Wall Street. You know, we need just the tiniest bit of political will to demand that Wall Street begin to pay its fair share, and we can roll back some of these tax cuts that we've seen recently with the GOP tax scam, the Trump tax scam, that have cost us enormously. There are a few programs where we can save quite a bit of money. One of those is in education. Some forms of student debt relief would save money. If we could just forgive the debts of people who have no capacity to repay, we'll begin to save money. With Medicare, I'm worried that too often, especially with an aging workforce, that Medicare is paying for injuries at work that workers' compensation, private insurance should be paying for. So I would like to see Medicare lawyer up on behalf of seniors who are working and disabled people who are working who get injured on the job, and make sure that Medicare is not paying what travelers and other big insurers should be paying for.
So the first step, I think, is to not retreat from protecting the social programs that have lifted an entire generation or more of seniors out of poverty. We cannot retreat from these social safety net programs, and I think that when we ask that question, oftentimes is implied in the answer. And in the case of Social Security in particular, I think one of the fixes that we can look at is that right now, if you make $127,000 a year, which presumably is not many people in this room, and certainly not me, you pay the same in Social Security taxes as somebody who makes $1 million a year. So we can lift that cap, and we can put more money into that system. Going forward, we should also make sure that Social Security is not the piggy bank for other government programs as it has been for decades in the past. We need to make sure we protect the funds that are in there and keep our promises. When it comes to Medicare, things are a little bit more complicated. I start from a position that we should be moving towards a single-payer health care program. I think that we'll see increased purchasing power. I think that we'll see increased efficiencies, and I think that having everybody in the pool is going to be good. There are some specific things I think we can look at in terms of reforms or improvements in that system. With increases in technology, we have the ability to probably provide some care at home that's otherwise being done in facilities. We should use those use that ability to improve the process where we can. We should make sure that if we're going to expand the program, that those who have the most ability to pay are asked to do so. But again, for me, the answer is our country is wealthier and more productive than any time in the world's history, any time or compared to any other country in this world. And we need to make sure that we prioritize the people of this country above corporations and the wealthy. And to me, there are two great examples right now of where we could find money. They passed that tax bill a few months ago, and it increased the budget deficit projected for the following year to $1.1 trillion. A week later, Paul Ryan went out there with a straight face, and he said that that budget deficit was the fault of Social Security and Medicare. He said that on the American TV so that we would point our finger at Social Security and Medicare. We know that's not true. We've also spent over $7 trillion in the last 2 conflicts that have gone on for nearly 2 decades now. That's money that we should be used to support the people of this country.
You know, I was raised where if you make a promise, you keep it. And we need to be making sure that our policies reflect that, and that when people were promised something that they've earned and put into with every single paycheck in their life, that it's there when they need it most, at the end of life, in the golden years. When you're retired, you shouldn't have to be worried about getting those benefits, and you should be able to focus on retirement, not worrying about whether that Social Security check's gonna be there depending on what Paul Ryan's saying on the news. And we can do that by raising the caps and by holding companies accountable. What's wrong with making them pay a little bit more? We have seen the Wall Street and 1%ers over the last 40 years, CEO pay went up by 937%. 937%. Workers' wages barely kept up with inflation. Baffles me that we can't figure out Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid being there, but we can figure out how to give our rich friends a little break when we get out to Washington. We need to start putting families first, our parents and grandparents first, so that they can enjoy those times in life. And we need to hold these companies accountable and make sure that the programs for our loved ones are there when they need them most, especially because they paid into them their whole life. And I'm gonna fight every single day to make sure that those promises are kept, so that people can focus on the important things in life.
Thank you both for your answers. Social Security and Medicare are not entitlement programs. They are money that's been put away by American workers, people that are disabled, and this is not who we are as a country. I believe the majority of people living in our country agree to protect our seniors, our pension holders, and our people with disabilities. And how we do that is what I mentioned earlier, and it is not a radical assessment to say we need a fundamental restructuring of our economy. And what that means is the deficit hawks, who have always said 0%, 0%, we have to keep it low, they gave away tax breaks for the 1%, not just human beings, corporations, because you know they're human beings now. Citizens United should go away quickly. Is making sure that we have a deficit that reflects our values. And what that means is protecting Medicare and Social Security is not unheard of. It means putting our money where our mouth is. It's something that doesn't get touched. The US bonds are like gold around the world. For people to say that we cannot spend anymore or we cannot have a deficit is not factual. It's not the same as our budgets at home. It's much different, but we decide where that money goes. Let's reverse that tax break, and let's use that $1 trillion to make sure our programs are funded. And that people are first, not corporations, but people. From the time they are born until the time they die, that's why it's important to have leadership in Washington that says no one gets left behind. I'm asking you to join me in protecting what people have earned and moving us towards an economy that reflects who we are as Americans.
Recently in Washington, the Republicans announced their proposed budget. It included trillions of dollars in cuts to social programs, including our Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That makes me angry, because I'm concerned and I'm worried about my neighbors and my friends who are now on those programs. And full disclosure, I am on Social Security and Medicare myself, and I do buy The numbers of what those Republicans are talking about is staggering. In future human suffering, it's unfathomable. We cannot allow our representatives to view our retirement savings account as a piggy bank to raid every time they want to cut elsewhere. To replenish, number one, those big tax cuts that they just gave to the extremely wealthy, the uber wealthy, and corporations. Ask anyone in this room who has ever worked and who has ever received a pay stub. You know what those boxes you see every week, every 2 weeks, they take that Medicare and that Social Security out of that check. I know I have. I did it for 35, 40 years. That is not the government's money. That is our money that we paid into. So if we were lucky enough to reach our golden years, that's there, that we can access that. And also, when you think about what those checks do for just preserving the matter about these programs going broke. It's true. We have been at a war for 17 years and it's costing every man, woman, and child in this country $35,000 a year in future costs. It's time we start setting our priorities where they belong, on the people. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with Jason Metzen. From North Korea to NATO to Russia to tariffs to trade policy and immigration, the relationship of the United States to the rest of the world has been the subject of intense recent attention and debate. And our next member of Congress from this district will have some role in helping shape that relationship, again, of the United States to the rest of the world. What can you share about your view of what that role is for our country?
I'm going to give you all an award. That's the first time we've got a good question on foreign policy that's very thorough and I think especially important and will resonate with everyone in this room. We have an obligation in this country. We were fortunate to come together. My grandpa fought in World War II. We were well respected back then. And we were looking out for people. We have gotten so far off track what that greatest generation brought in terms of the dignity and respect that we're seeing with on a global level to such a protectionist and closed viewpoint, whether it be our trade policy, the way that we're interacting with other foreign leaders. And I think what we've got to bring is a little bit of northeastern Minnesota out to those conversations where you do good by your neighbor and you treat them kindly and you make sure that you're being respectful of one another even when you're disagreeing, and that we give people hope elsewhere where they don't got it quite as good as we do here, that they can have it better someday too by getting together and working together to make their communities work for them and their families. And they can learn from a few of our mistakes where we prioritize big business and bailouts to Wall Street 1%ers. But there should be no mistaking that I have faith that we can still do that. It's why I'm running for this seat, because I believe America is great, that we are so fortunate in this country to be able to get an education, go to college, and do all these things that our great-grandparents could have only imagined would be opportunities for us when we immigrated here. It's our job to light that torch again and make sure that other people around the world can believe in that too.
My father, Knut, was 2 when the Nazis invaded Oslo, and he was 8 when they left. If you want to hear what it's like to let bullies have the reins, just Give him 5 minutes. I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room that have not forgotten. The wars happened, and frankly, as my dad always says, we're still in Korea. How long ago was that? We have become, in this administration, an isolationist country. I have really not seen that in my lifetime. It was always diplomacy first. Let's learn how to lead and listen and assist instead of destroying, demeaning, and leaving people behind. We right now, I and many of you watched as our president stood by Putin, who is a bad actor, I'm just gonna say that. He's not our friend, he will never be our friend. What he would like is to destabilize our country, and guess what? It's working. So I'm gonna ask you tonight to consider this. As Democrats, as Republicans, as independents, as people that are apolitical, we can get that message of bringing people together. We can get that message of putting people in positions to represent us on the stage around the world as people who believe in climate change and believe in human rights and don't just pick up and leave the sandbox because we didn't get our way. I know we can work things out. I know we can travel abroad and not have to be embarrassed when people say, what the hell's going on in your country? And have to say, how do we even have an answer for that? The answer is this: we work together, we don't retreat, we resist and we persist, and we make America proud again. Thank you.
I spent a long, long time as a journalist, 35 plus years, where truth still meant something. And I worked every day under the thumb of my own pressure to make sure that everything and every word that I printed, every word that I uttered, was based in ethics. And I have to tell you now that I've retired, and to watch our current president, it frightens me, it angers me, and I'll tell you what, when I go out and talk to people, they say, we have to impeach that man. And I tell them, you know, emotionally I'm there, as a voter I'm there, but as I go to Washington as your congresswoman, I have to research this, I have to study it, and then we will build the articles of impeachment, and we will send that man packing. But it's not gonna happen overnight. Mueller is working, we just have to be patient. In the meantime, we have a Republican president who has stacked the Supreme Court. He's got a Republican House and Senate. What are we gonna do? We're gonna have to start building our own walls. Not a wall along our border, our southern border or our northern border. We're gonna have to build a wall in the US House. It's gonna have to be a blue wall. And to build that wall, I'm gonna ask each and every one of you here tonight to roll up your sleeves and get out there and start working. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Tell them how important this election is to the future of not just us here in this room, but our children and our grandchildren. President Trump needs to go, but there is a process. Many of you in the room here are old enough to remember how we got rid of Nixon. It didn't happen overnight. And he went the way of bad presidents. But you know, when we have a president that go up to Canada, to a G7, he's handing, we will talk about this later. I will be in the back of the room at the end, and we can have a long, long discussion, but I want to hear your ideas on that. Thank you.
I apologize. I'd like to have the question repeated. I think I heard four different answers to the same question, so I just want to make sure.
Sure. The question was from North Korea to NATO to Russia, to tariffs, to trade policy, and to immigration. The relationship of the United States to the world has been the subject of recent, heightened, intense attention. And our next member of Congress from this district will have some role in helping shape what the relationship is between the United States and the rest of the world. So what can you share about what your view is about what that role should be?
Without a doubt, Trump is undoing the world order, the Pax Americana that we've enjoyed for the last generation. But he didn't start that. Bush and Cheney refused to collaborate with other militaries and the UN system in the response to the Boxing Day tsunami. And I was there on the ground in Indonesia and doing a fair amount of translation as a civilian volunteer for our Navy. And it was honestly very embarrassing. So we see this again and again, where the Republicans would like to have our contact with other states primarily be of a military nature, that they've replaced the State Department with military-to-military relationships, and it's hard to understand what Trump's motive is, if there is any, in just literally undoing everything. It is terribly embarrassing. We've had a couple of go-arounds with creating the world order that we've enjoyed. So the United States was really involved in creating the League of Nations, which failed, building the UN. It was a hard sell in a lot of really Republican districts, places like Indiana. Mark Ritchie tells a really great story about the fight to create the UN. So I think that my experience working abroad, working within the UN system will be an asset, and I look forward to finding a way to rebuild our country in a truly fair way. After World War II, our presence in the world was really interesting. We really helped decolonize, undo the colonial empires in Asia. We were a force for liberation. Workers on the docks on the West Coast prevented Dutch ships from loading and rearming to retake Indonesia after World War II. We've been able to support the freedom of other people in the world, and we're not doing that right now. Right now we've got Trump attacking common sense public health solutions like breastfeeding to advance Nestle and other infant formula manufacturers. It's really embarrassing. It's really a shame.
America is the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's the country that invited its citizens to engage in the pursuit of happiness. And it's the country that said that certain virtues like freedom and equality and liberty are inalienable and not bestowed upon us by man, our fellow man. It's the strength of these values that are written in places like the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution and at the Statue of Liberty that I think have set a light for the world for many decades. America has an opportunity to continue to lead the world when it works in league with our partners across the globe. And I think what we're seeing today is that the administration in Washington, D.C. has found a way to make friends of our adversaries, or attempt to make friends with our adversaries, and to make opponents out of our traditional allies. And I'm deeply concerned by that because I don't think that the road that we're heading down right now is in line with our traditional democratic values. I think that countries like North Korea and Russia would be important to have peace with, but I'm very skeptical of their motives at this point in time. And I don't think it's worth our alliance with other NATO nations to pursue that. When it comes to immigration, I think that we have another obligation in this country, which is that we know these virtues exist, but we know that there have been times throughout our history where we've fallen short of them. And I think that patriotism means not just knowing these verses and what these words mean, but I think patriotism means questioning your government even when it's your own team. And I think that what we have to examine in this immigration situation, for one thing, is what the legacy of our impact in Central America has been. The people who are coming through Central and South, or Central America through Mexico to our border are coming because they're fleeing from countries that have been war-torn, oftentimes because of our intervention there over the years. And so we have to both be optimistic about the future of our country, aware of the good things that we've done in our past, critical of the things that we think we should improve, and we need to keep fighting every single day. This democracy falls apart when people like us fail to care any longer. And so that's why this race is so important.
Atmospheric Association has indicated that 6 of the hottest years in its 138-year climate record have occurred since 2010. In addition, the 8th Congressional District is of course home to the Boundary Waters and other celebrated treasured natural settings. What role would concerns about the environment play in your work in Congress?
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the biggest issues right now is the protection of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness and within the Lake Superior watershed. And up north, there is a lot of discussion and debate going on between copper-nickel sulfide mining and those who want to protect water. And in the grand scheme of things, first off, I want to say that climate change is real. Anyone that lives within our 8th district is well aware of that. In Moose Lake, we're starting to see wild turkeys come back. The birch trees are dying off. They enjoy a cooler climate. We're seeing hardwoods develop in my yard. We're seeing 100-year rains coming at an average of 50 years, 20 years, and 10 years. We see constant flooding now where we didn't see flooding. We live in a water-rich environment. Minnesota is known for its 10,000 plus lakes. And now into the mix, the economy, and to shore up a boom and bust economy of taconite and iron ore, which I support. Foreign corporations want to come into Minnesota and extract copper nickel through a process that is going to threaten our water. Water is life. We all live downstream. Our water needs to be protected. So I am against copper nickel sulfide mining anywhere near our water tributaries and our rivers. That said, we have to, thank you. That said, we have to do something to help shore up the boom and bust economy that our friends and neighbors on the Iron Range are struggling with. We know that taconite is going to be there for a while, but it's tied to a world market. When the price drops, the plants close, we lose our workers, we lose families. We have to start working on economic development that will work in tandem with the current mining, not add to that boom and bust with a cockamamie plan to mine copper nickel sulfide within the most pristine areas of this country.
A few years ago, Minnesota 350 and the University of Minnesota Duluth held a climate symposium for the benefit of publicly educating U.S. Congressman Rick Nolan on climate science. And he patiently sat through some really stunning presentations where scientists working on the lake showed with their UAVs how they were measuring the increase of temperature already in Lake Superior. They presented a future that is bleak if we don't act. And I was kind of impressed that Representative Rick Nolan committed to reversing climate change, but we haven't seen concrete steps to do that. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about what that would have really meant if he had met that pledge. So we are looking at a transition from a forested landscape to a savanna, that we would see fires, right? We have, in addition to forests and wetlands, we've got substantial peat reserves in northern Minnesota, and pretty much everywhere else globally, peat has been exploited as a fuel. So it's a really kind of neat, rich, locally abundant but globally rare environment, and we risk losing that. And we've had some peat fires in the Bemidji area. They smell terrible. I've been in environments where peat has been on fire for decades in Southeast Asia. It's not a good future. So we need to avoid that. We need to keep our climate cool. I do have the beginning of a plan where we pursue the carbon taxes, where other nations are already collecting it, that we allow our First Nations and our local land managers to tap into that, to begin to manage our forests, to sequester carbon and preserve biodiversity. I think that'll require some changes, probably to the state constitution. I mean, the DNR kind of has a responsibility to support the extraction of timber and mineral resources. And we need to instead start thinking about how we pay people to preserve the climate, the lakes that we love, the fish that we love, the mix of forest species, tree species that we have. Thank you.
I think that we understand the impact of climate change across the world, and we sometimes don't recognize that it's going to be happening much more quickly than we would like. The impact that's going to have globally is going to include places of famine and fire, and it's going to cause migration, and it'll upset societies because of the refugee crises that will be born of it here locally. We'll see changes in our own ecosystems. The lakes will warm up, it'll impact our fishing and recreational opportunities, it'll change our agricultural zones, it'll have widespread effects across this planet. And I think that we need to move aggressively away from fuels like coal and oil and replace them with renewable sources of energy, solar, wind, etc. In order to do that, the dilemma that we face is that many of those technologies currently require copper, nickel, cobalt, palladium, platinum, and so forth. And so we have a dilemma on our hands about how we as consumers responsibly source the things that we need in the 21st century to improve on a larger scale our own lives and improve the lives of people across this planet. I believe that we should not approve any mining project that isn't safe. I think that we have to put faith and oversight into our regulatory process. I think one of the first steps of doing that is to take back the U.S. House of Representatives, to hold Donald Trump's EPA accountable to the people of this country, and not to corporations that are trying to sell off our lands and our public assets. That's the importance of this race. And the difficulty that we face is that this is a district that both the blue and green wing of the Democratic coalition is going to be necessary to win. And I think that this debate has raged on for a long time, and we have to find a way to find some understanding. And so from my perspective, again, my position on the mining projects is that I'm not going to support anything that can't be done safely according to regulatory agencies. I think that the projects in question have different statutes that are applicable to them. I think that Twin Metals has a federal statute that we're going to see a review of, probably through the U.S. Forest Service, to determine the appropriate uses in the Superior National Forest. I think that's a good thing to do. We need to make sure that we get it right if we're going to do it. And we need to make sure if we're going to do it that we hold the companies accountable to the taxpayer and not vice versa. That means bankruptcy-proof financial assurances.
Minnesota has a strong history of stewardship and sustainability. And now more than ever, we need to make sure that we're recycling our water and that future generations can use it. And that means protecting our water means we need to invest in it. We need to make sure that the water infrastructure is there in our communities, whether they're up in northern Minnesota, down here in the southern part of this district, or anywhere else in the state that we're having these issues. When we're out in Washington, we're working for everyone in this country to protect their water. And we also need to make sure that we're investing in the science and technology so that the next generation has the tools from us to mitigate tomorrow's problems today. We've got great resources here up at the Natural Resource Research Institute in Duluth that are doing just that right now. They've got a bacteria that eats sulfate, and you can sell the byproduct as fertilizer to a farmer. Those are technologies that we have the obligation to pass along to our kids so that they can do things a little better than we have, just like our parents and grandparents did for us. And I'm committed to making sure that the resources are there for our communities to make those investments so that the future generation can enjoy the same resources that we have here, and that it's one of our focal priorities out in Washington that we make sure that our kids have those clean water resources and other things that they need to keep the clean water there at their disposal.
First of all, having a brother-in-law that's a climate scientist means that he would say climate change is already here and we're not doing very much about it. And in Minnesota, how that affects us as a second-term mayor in North Branch, our infrastructure, some of it, especially under The streets is 80, 90 years old. When we have a fast rain event, our sewers and our runoff cannot handle it in our city, right now in North Branch, Minnesota. What it means for us is, once again, to decide who we want to be when we grow up. America, as far as countries go, if you've traveled anywhere else outside of the United States, we're sort of a toddler. And sometimes that means we care more about bigger and better and consuming than we do about protecting and sustaining what we have. So we get to make a choice again. Do we invest in getting off fossil fuels? Do we make going green, like North Branch is now a green step city? Do we make our whole district green? Do we create incentives and tax breaks for companies that want to take us off of fossil fuels and to a greener economy? Are we really willing to invest in rail so that we can move more people and everyone doesn't have to drive in a car? How big can we make our roads? Is there a way we can do that like other countries are doing, where we actually make roads that light up? What about that? What about trails that light up? What can we do to make it easier? Well, first of all, we have to make it affordable, because I would love to have solar on my home. It's not affordable for me right now as a single parent. Let's change it, let's decide who we are, and let's commit to getting off fossil fuels and becoming a leader in the world for sustainable development. And finally, it's the first time I've seen the stop sign. Believing in climate change, as Paul Douglas says, does not make you liberal, it makes you literate.
For the next question, we'll start with Jason Benson. Since the last election, events in Hollywood, Washington, and Minnesota have added renewed attention to the struggle to ensure that women are able to live and work in environments that are safe and empowering. What do you believe that you can do in a leadership role in Congress to help ensure that the energies of this moment lead to enduring changes?
First of all, I think we need to applaud all the women who have come forward to share their difficult stories and situations. There's a lot that goes through your head, especially as a young guy. I was raised with three younger brothers, and had a lot of girl cousins on the other, from my mom's sisters, 4 girls in one of the families, 3 girls and 1 boy in another. And so I was fortunate to grow up and was taught to respect women at the workplace, at home, and in every encounter that I had. You opened the door. A lot of people didn't get that through their head. In Washington, and much like a corporation or a small business, there's an HR department. But I think when we talk about Washington politics in particular, what we have is 0 checks and balances, and someone being able to bring a complaint without a third party there. They can't have a safe spot to do that. We need to ensure that women are treated with the utmost respect and dignity that we can, and we can start by making sure that we have a program in place that is a third-party source where they can bring their complaints and situations and have it reviewed by people who are going to assess the situation and make sure that there is a suitable result to the issue. Because it's unacceptable that we're dealing with this in this day and age, and that stories continue to come out. And I want to throw light on one thing, because there was some news today that came out, and I've got to say I'm disappointed in Congressman Nolan's situation I applaud them for coming out. I have the deepest respect for Rick as a friend, but to have that happen really hurt. And we need to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying, time's up. Time's up to not recognize that this isn't something that happened before or happened 20 years ago. This is not a woman's issue, it's a man's issue. So what I want to ask you tonight is this. Everyone in this room has a mother or sister or daughter. We have not passed an equal rights amendment for women.
Exactly.
How can that be? Women have not had the right to vote for that long. I'm going to say it right now, me too, 54 years old, and it's not just one time it happens. And so how it ends is by this, saying zero tolerance. Not just saying it, not just writing it in a policy, but living it. So if you're around and you see it happening, or if you've participated in it and you need to make some amends, if you want to always say, oh, look at that sad thing that happened there, it's happening right now in our Democratic Party, in our state, in our cities, in our country. You know how you can change it? Is by talking about it. By not saying, boys will be boys, they're just young, when girls that are underage can't come and speak out because they're afraid of repercussions or not being able to work in their field or having their political life ended, shame on us. Shame on us for not listening, believing, and taking action. So I'm sitting here tonight of a woman and a mother of 2 girls, and I'm telling you right now, I'm willing to breathe fire to make sure I never have to read an article like that again.
One of the neatest things I've seen in many, many years is the courageous women who have come forward in the past year or two with the Me Too movement. It reminds me of other young women back in the 1970s that were fighting for something called equal rights. And slowly but surely, states are signing on to the Equal Rights Amendment. Can you believe it? We still haven't come to a point where we have legislation, where we have an amendment in our Constitution that says and declares, yes, women are equal. Women need to be treated equal, whether it's in a paycheck or whether they're treated, how they're treated at work. I'll tell you what, women have been second-class citizens. Kirsten said that she was part of the Me Too. I can say I'm part of the Me Too. But we didn't have permission to talk about it. We didn't have fancy offices in our workplaces to go and talk. Either we left our jobs or we just kept our mouths shut and kept our distance from those men that we worked with who we knew were abusers. Folks, it is time that we grow up and that we give women equal footing in the workplace and in the home, that women have equal rights. And when I go to Congress as your Congresswoman, I will fight to make sure the Equal Rights Amendment becomes a part of the fabric of this country. I have done a lot of work on that, but a lot more work needs to be done, and that takes everyone in this room to say, we're not going to put up with it anymore. Headlines going, oh, isn't that too bad, and we wouldn't put up with that in our workplace. It's time to just say no, and to shine a light on all of this bad behavior that we all have known about, we have all witnessed, and I am so proud of those young women who went on social media and they proudly said, and they stood up and said, you know, me too, but I'm not going to put up with it anymore. And I think that's what we need to keep doing. We need to keep standing up until we have equal rights, until no young woman has to be concerned or fearful from joining into the workforce or fears that they're going to be assaulted, attacked. No, just say no. It's time we all stand up and say no more.
So I grew up around the struggle to pass the ERA and in protests and organizing meetings that my mom and her colleagues had to, there was a demonstration at the Beltrami County Courthouse every time a woman was killed by her husband or a woman was charged for fighting back against an abusive husband or lover. And there in Beltrami County, surrounded by the 3 very large Native American reservations, we see a lot of red dresses hanging in trees as a symbol for it. The problem with missing and murdered Indigenous women it's really it really is alarming, and it's one of the big reasons to fight against the man camps that are going to follow the Enbridge pipeline expansion. That would result in what Quebec and Republicans in this district have talked about when they talk about turning the copper sulfide mining opportunity into another Bakken. It's something that we need to really examine. I mean, it's not in our district, but it's just across the border in Monoman County, White Earth. In the last year or two, I believe there were 0 rape charges prosecuted, 0 arrests for rape. I mean, the problem of the murder and abuse of Native women in particular is bad in our state and in our country, and some of these big infrastructure projects are really threatening because of it. Online, I've been involved in the toxic Twitter campaign of Amnesty International. I've been involved in campaigns of the Sex Workers Outreach Project. An awful lot of abuse towards women is around their expression of their own interest in sexual desire, and we need to end stigma surrounding issues of sexual health. So I really recommend everyone take a look at Amnesty International's Toxic Twitter campaign. One of the great leaders here in Minnesota, Nancy Lyons, recently had a great presentation that I think that you can find. It's a social media breakfast video. She talked about the other side of Me Too, not getting advancement at work because she was like a relatively conventionally unattractive lesbian, and she saw that she was not getting advancement when people kind of advertised their sexual availability at work, were getting promoted, and she was getting fired and replaced because of that. So it really is a big problem, and it cuts both ways, and we need to do what we can to lift up women and girls and to fight. We can close the wage gap, we can pass the Equal Rights Amendment, and I'm there.
The first thing that we need to do is believe women, period. And the story that came out today, I want to just let people know kind of what the facts of it are. MinnPost reported today that in Congressman Nolan's office in 2015, there was a man who was the legislative director out there, and he was harassing young women in the DC office on the federal side. The women came forward and complained, and the man was he was made to leave the office under the terms of retirement, essentially. Several months later, in January 2016, I took over the Nolan campaign. I hadn't worked with the Nolan operation before, and federal leadership suggested that I hire this gentleman onto the campaign to do some work that we needed done. The young women who had experienced that indignity in the Washington, D.C. office found out about his hiring and came to me and explained what had happened in Washington, D.C. When I found out, I was irate, and I went to Congressman Nolan and demanded that he be fired, and then I fired him. That's exactly what I did. The worst thing about some of this is, number one, the experience that too many women have dealt with. One of my best friends was a central figure in this story. She had never told me what she had endured in Washington, D.C. She was a young 20-year-old woman who got out there for her first job, and her supervisor harassed her on a daily basis, and she was meant to feel as if her job performance depended upon his satisfaction. I can't imagine what that's like because I haven't had to deal with it. And so I was proud to stand with those women and to insist on that man's firing, and I'm proud to stand with them in their bravery in bringing this story out today. I think it's important that they be heard. And the reason it's so important for me is I think that that type of behavior is one behavior on a continuum of behavior that starts with the idea that somehow men have ownership or possession over women. And for me, in my personal life, that had a great and dramatic impact because my mother was shot to death when I was 17 years old in a domestic violence incident in my house. It was a murder-suicide. It was another story about a woman who had a different plan for her life than a man did. And I'm not going to let that type of behavior happen in places where I'm occupying. So I thank those women for standing up.
With that, I believe we've reached the time of the evening for closing statements. So each of the candidates will have 2 minutes for that, and we'll begin with Soren Sorensen.
I just want to start attacking all the other candidates so we can stay here all night. Well, I hope, have we turned this off now? I hope I made it clear that my laundry list of progressive agenda items comes from a basic belief in human rights, and that despite my relatively new entrance in this race, my lack of the kind of campaign coffers that maybe being cozier with Enbridge and Polynet would give me, that I've managed to inspire a few of you to go out there and do the work. We're only going to win this district if we mobilize people, right? If we recruit volunteers, we knock doors, because the other side always has more money, right? Sheldon Adelson personally outspent everything that the Rick Nolan campaign could raise 3 to 1, right? This district has been in the past one of the big spending districts. Our only way to inoculate ourselves against that toxic media environment is to talk to our neighbors about what we really believe in. And I think that a lot of people will find something that they will love in my agenda. I've had a lot of Republicans, because I knock every door, right? I'm not going after likely primary voters. I'm not just talking to Democrats. I'm knocking every door. And I'm finding a lot of conservatives, they don't really love my socialism, my Medicare for all, but they fish. You know, they really honestly want to preserve our landscape. They're farmers. They really want to increase our market opportunities. They want programs that are designed to conserve on the farm to actually pay for themselves because they want to do these things. So I think we can win. I think we can win in this primary with your help, with your small donations. So I hope to meet all of you at my table back in the corner and get $1 or $2 from each of you, and a commitment to work a shift on primary day. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for putting this forum on. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. My story is one about struggle. It's about hardworking people. It's about the politics that we espouse to improve our lives, and it's about the future. I mentioned just a little bit ago some of the things that have happened in my personal life that had a dramatic impact on me, that showed me what the bottom looks like. I dropped out of college and I had to start rebuilding my life after my mother was murdered. But it was through the strength of programs like health insurance through my dad's good union job, and strong public school teachers, and access to the opportunities that many people don't have but should, that I've been able to be successful in my life. And right now I think that we're looking at a country that's been knocked down too. We're at a low point. We're on the bottom. We need to stand up. That's what this election is about. It's about standing up for a future where we see equality. It's about standing up for education and standing up for women. It's about standing up for all of the things that we know are going to make our country stronger in the future. We can't do this alone. This is going to be one of the most expensive and contested, hard-fought congressional races in the country. And it's not going to be one, as Soren said, with just dollars. It's going to be one with hardworking people out there talking to their neighbors, conveying a message that unites people across this district, unites Democrats with independents. And I think that message is about what we can be in the face of this changing economy. If we send people to Washington, D.C., we're going to fight on behalf of working people and advocate for solutions that we know can improve the lives of our neighbors. And for me, that's childcare, affordable childcare. It's protecting and preserving Social Security and Medicare and pensions. It's universal single-payer health care. It's changing the way that we do politics in this country. That's what's at stake in this election, and it's going to take all of us to win this seat, to go to Washington, D.C., to advocate on behalf of our values, and to hold the Trump administration accountable. That's what I'm asking you to do here tonight. My name is Joe Radinovich. I'm asking for your support on August 14th. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for a lot more than that after that. We're going to work together to get this done. Thank you very much.
So again, thank you all for coming. My name is Jason Metza. I really appreciate you taking a little time out of your night for us all tonight. I believe in fairness. It's why I got into politics in the first place, because we need more accountability and responsibility in our politics. And people shouldn't have to work hard and not be able to get by their whole lives, which means we need to focus on making our government work for those people again, versus the Wall Street 1%ers and big business that have been the priority out in Washington for too long now. I knew that to serve this region best, we needed as a campaign to start by listening to the voters in this district. We had conversations that shaped what our neighbors, or shaped our platform with the vision of what our neighbors brought to us during the course of those community conversations. We listened to you and we built it into our Northern New Deal. And I know the people of Northern Minnesota here don't want a politician that's prioritizing the folks that I think we can all agree have gotten the lion's share of investment in this country. And again, that's the Wall Street 1%ers and our big businesses, while we're all getting left behind. When you send me to Congress, I'm gonna be making sure that we're holding those companies accountable, making them do what they say they're gonna do, and then I'm gonna put our families first. If we start putting our families first again in this country and making sure that we're investing in them and the Main Street businesses, we're gonna be able to build an economy, a 21st century economy that works for all of us, not just a few. Thank you again for being here. My name's Jason Metza, and I hope I can earn your support on August 14th.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. Tim, I just want to let you know that I'm so grateful you're there on a mic and I'm not in your courtroom. You're trying to put me in jail, but I'm grateful for your work. I want you to know that as a parent, as a daughter of an immigrant, as someone who's been on multiple tours with their Navy husband and lost a marriage and lost what I thought life would look like and had no health insurance for the first time in my life and had to volunteer at great food programs so I could bring home a little extra to my family. I fight every day, like I have for my whole life, to make my community a better place. And that community, as a mayor, has turned into a region. And now for me, it's turned into a district. I will lead, not just for Democrats or Republicans or independents or for apolitical people, but for every single person from every corner of our district. I believe that together we can get it right, and we can get immigration right. As a woman, more women in Washington and leadership at the local, at the state, at the federal level, helps us make decisions that we should be helping make. No man, I hate to say this because my dad's here, should ever make a decision about what a woman does with her body, or her health care, or her vote, or her ability to thrive in the United States of America. As a woman, I have watched as people have lost rights, rights that we fought for long ago, being eroded. But I refuse to work in fear or hate or blame everything on the government we have right now, because guess what? We as a people can change it. Get out and vote. Vote for change. Vote for more women in office. Vote blue.
From stagnant wages to the lack of affordable health care.
Your mic.
I will turn the mic on. As I said, from stagnant wages to the lack of affordable health care, many families are just one paycheck or one major illness away from financial disaster. We can no longer afford to continue the same old politics as usual. We know it's not working. Earlier tonight I said America is not broken. I believe that. I believe we can still make this grand experiment in democracy work, but it's going to take each and every one of us rolling up our sleeves to make it happen. Our country and our democracy is at a crossroads. Do we continue to blindly follow a president who turns his back on our closest neighbors and allies in favor of dangerous and deadly dictators? Starts a trade war without deliberate planning and thought to those of us who will lose our jobs and our livelihoods as a result, who uses babies and toddlers as a bargaining chip as part of his art of the deal. That is not leadership, nor is it the path to prosperity that most Americans, we can see it on the horizon, and we're all so eager to travel there. Together we must travel a path where best business practices are not based on corporate profits. A path where government regulations are based on the protections of our air and our water for future generations to come. A path, yes, a path that connects our urban friends with our rural neighbors. But unless we unify, we will lose this amazing opportunity to move forward. Together, we all can create a future where a quality education of our kids is not based on a zip code. A future in which all human rights are protected and respected. A future where, yes, equal means equal. A future where a hard day's work is rewarded by a paycheck big enough to stretch over to cover safe housing, food, and yes, some left over for that rainy day. It's a future worth fighting for. My promise to you is whether you are a millionaire or struggling to make ends meet or just get by, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, or none of the above, I will listen to you. I will take your ideas to Washington and fashion good old common sense legislation that will benefit every resident of this district, this great diverse congressional district. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Michelle Lee. Tonight I ask you for your vote on August 14th and again on November 6th. Thank you.
And with that, please join me in giving one more big round of applause for all of these candidates that joined us here. Now, as you leave, there is one more table that I want to mention to make sure you saw it when you came in tonight. Now, there's a table out there where you can find a form to register to vote. Now, for heaven's sakes, if you have not registered to vote, if your family members have not registered to vote, if you have friends, relatives, neighbors who have not registered to vote, make sure you get signed up, that you get them signed up to make sure your voice and their voice is heard. Now, the primary is on August 14th, but early voting is underway. And if you heard a candidate tonight, or a cause or an issue that moved you, There are ways to make your voice echo in ways that go beyond just voting in that primary. There are sign-up sheets out there at the tables for a lot of these candidates to volunteer, or just generally to volunteer within Senate District 32. And although no one can do everything, everybody can do something. And please also remember that after August 14th, there's a saying in politics that once you get down to the general election, the choice is not between a candidate and the almighty. It's a choice between a candidate and the alternative. So if there's a candidate up there, who's your favorite? They don't make it through the primary. Remember that when you go to the polls on November 6th. So thanks again to everybody for making it out tonight. Thanks to everyone who made this happen. Stick around. We hope you get